The average woman over 70 apologizes 6 times a day, not once for something she actually did wrong. After 80, it gets worse. You stop apologizing for mistakes and start apologizing for existing, for eating slowly, for needing the stairs, for calling your own daughter. Last Sunday, I sat at my daughter's table, plate still half full, everyone else finished. I heard myself say, "Sorry, I'm so slow." Nobody asked for that. Nobody was bothered. It just came out, like a reflex. I'm 90 years old. My name is Louise. I spent decades apologizing for taking up space before I realized what it cost me. Not just dignity, but how my own family saw me. What I'm about to tell you isn't advice from a book. It's what happened when I stopped saying sorry and started claiming the space I'd earned. If you've ever apologized for something that wasn't your fault, type 1. If not, type 0. Stay with me. That night, driving home from my daughter's house, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Not the dinner, not the food. That one word, sorry. How many times had I said it that day alone? I started counting. Sorry when I asked the cashier to repeat the total because I didn't catch it the first time. Sorry when I needed an extra moment finding my keys at the front door while my neighbor waited behind me. Sorry when I called my granddaughter. I actually opened the conversation with, "Sorry to bother you, sweetheart." She wasn't bothered. She was happy to hear from me, but I'd already decided for her. I'd already told her I was an interruption before she had a chance to tell me I wasn't. And the worst part? I didn't even realize I was doing it. None of us do. That's the problem. That's the thing about apologizing at our age. It stops being a choice. It becomes a reflex, like blinking. You hold the door open a second too long, sorry. You ask the doctor a follow-up question, sorry for taking your time. You sit down on a bench in the middle of a walk because your knees need a rest. Sorry, sorry, sorry. As if resting is something that requires permission from strangers. As if your body having needs is an inconvenience to the entire world. Let me tell you about my friend Dorothy. She's 78. Sweetest woman you'd ever meet. Always smiling, always gracious, always making sure everyone around her was comfortable before she even thought about herself. But over time, I started noticing something. Dorothy wasn't polite. Dorothy was afraid. She apologized for everything. She apologized to waiters for ordering something different from everyone else at the table. She apologized to her doctor for asking too many questions about her own medication. She apologized to her son every single time she called, every single time. "Are you busy? I'm sorry. I just wanted to hear your voice." Her son would say, "It's fine, Mom." But Dorothy heard something else in his tone. Or she thought she did. Because that's what constant apologizing does to your mind. It trains your ears to search for proof that you are, in fact, a burden. You start listening for sighs that aren't there. You start reading pauses as impatience. You start interpreting silence as confirmation that yes, you are too much, too slow, too needy, too old. One afternoon over coffee, Dorothy told me something I have never forgotten. She said, "Catherine, I don't even know when I started doing this. I just know I can't stop. I say sorry before I even open my mouth, like I need to apologize in advance for having something to say." That hit me hard, because I recognized it immediately, not just in Dorothy, in myself, in almost every woman our age I have ever known. We weren't born apologizing for our existence. We were shaped into it. Decades of being told to be quieter, smaller, less trouble. Decades of making room for everyone else, at the table, in the conversation, in life, until we forgot we deserved room too. And now, in our 70s, our 80s, our 90s, it shows up in the smallest, most invisible moments: a whispered sorry at a dinner table, a hesitation before speaking up, a step backward when we should be standing still. Here's what I need you to understand. When you apologize for things that aren't wrong, eating at your own pace, needing a moment to catch your breath, calling someone who loves you, you aren't being polite. You are labeling yourself. You are telling the world over and over in the quietest voice that your presence is a problem, not because anyone told you so, because you told yourself. You said it so many times, in so many small ways, that it became the truth everyone around you accepted, including you. An apology should follow a mistake. Existing is not a mistake. But here's where it gets worse. When you apologize enough times, people stop correcting you. They start believing you, and that changes everything. Here's the thing nobody warns you about. When you apologize often enough, people stop hearing it as politeness. They start hearing it as truth. You say, "Sorry for being slow," enough times, and one day your daughter stops waiting. Not because she's cruel, because you taught her that waiting for you is a favor, not a given. You say, "Sorry for calling," enough times, and your son starts letting it go to voicemail, not because he doesn't love you, because you convinced him that your calls are interruptions. That's the real cost of over-apologizing. It doesn't just shrink you, it reshapes how the people you love most see you and treat you. Let me tell you about a woman named Helen. She's 81, lives alone in a small house she's owned for 37 years. Sharp mind, good health, still drives herself to church every Sunday. But if you spent an hour with Helen, you'd think she was falling apart, not because of anything you'd see, because of everything she says. "Sorry I forgot to buy the right coffee. Sorry the house is a little messy. Sorry I didn't hear you come in. Sorry, sorry, sorry." Her children grew up hearing it. And somewhere along the way, they stopped pushing back. They stopped saying, "Mom, you don't need to apologize." Instead, they started finishing her sentences, making decisions without asking. Her son sold her second car, the one she used for weekend errands, because he decided she didn't need it anymore. Her daughter canceled the family Christmas gathering and told her after the fact. "We didn't want to stress you out, Mom." Helen didn't argue. She didn't say, "I wanted to host. I've hosted for 40 years." She just nodded, because when you've spent years apologizing for your presence, you lose something worse than confidence. You lose the belief that you have the right to object. That's the danger. You start by apologizing for small things, eating slowly, asking questions, taking up a seat on the bus. But over time, those small apologies build a story in the minds of everyone around you, and that story says, "I am less than I used to be. I am fading. I need permission to be here." And when that story plays long enough, your family starts acting on it. They stop consulting you about holiday plans. They make arrangements around you instead of with you. They hover, they manage, they protect. And every single one of those actions, no matter how loving the intention, is a quiet way of saying, "We agree." You are smaller now. Helen told me once, sitting in that same kitchen where she used to cook Thanksgiving dinner for 12 people. "I don't know when they stopped asking my opinion. I just know they did. And I think it's because I stopped acting like it mattered." That sentence broke something in me, because she was right. Not about her opinion not mattering. It always mattered. But about what her constant apologizing had communicated over the years. She hadn't told her family she was a burden with one big announcement. She'd told them with 1,000 tiny sorries, whispered across decades, until they believed her. Here's the truth most of us don't want to face. You didn't become smaller because of age. You became smaller because you kept telling everyone you were. And they listened, not because they wanted to diminish you, because you were so convincing, so consistent, so relentless in your own self-erasure that they had no reason not to believe you. If the person herself says she's in the way, who are they to argue? But here's the good news. If your words built that story, your words can rewrite it. Not overnight, not with one grand gesture, but with one small, stubborn decision that changes everything. Has anyone ever made a decision for you without asking? Type 1 if yes, 0 if no. Now let me tell you what I tried and what happened when I stopped saying sorry. I didn't wake up one morning and decide to become a different person. That's not how it works at 90. Change at this age doesn't come from motivation or some inspirational quote on the internet. It comes from exhaustion. I was exhausted from hearing myself apologize, so I made a deal with myself. 1 week, 7 days. I would not apologize for anything that wasn't actually my fault. Not for eating slowly, not for needing help, not for calling someone, not for existing. Just 1 week. That's all I asked of myself. The first test came that same Sunday. Dinner at my daughter's house. Same table, same people, same food. I ate at my pace. Everyone finished before me. My son-in-law reached for my plate, then caught himself and pulled back. My daughter kept talking. I kept eating. And when I finally put my fork down, nobody seemed to have noticed the delay. Or maybe they had, and it simply didn't matter. The difference was, I hadn't told them it should matter. I hadn't flagged my slowness with an apology. I hadn't announced that I was a problem. And without that announcement, there was no problem, just a woman finishing her dinner. Tuesday, grocery store. I was at the register looking for my card in my wallet. The line behind me was growing. The woman directly behind shifted her weight from one foot to the other. Normally, I would have said, sorry, I'm so slow, just a moment. Instead, I just kept looking, found the card, paid, smiled at the cashier. The woman behind me smiled back. That's it. No drama, no judgment, no scene. The entire catastrophe I had rehearsed in my head, the impatient sighing, the eye rolls, the barely hidden frustration, none of it happened. Because most of the time, the impatience we fear exists only in our imagination. We build it brick by brick, out of apologies we never needed to give. Thursday. I called my granddaughter. Normally I'd open with, sorry to bother you, sweetheart, are you busy? This time I said, hi, sweetheart. I was thinking about you today. There was a pause. Then she laughed and said, Grandma, that's the nicest thing anyone has said to me all week. We talked for 40 minutes, longest conversation we'd had in over a year. She told me about her job, about a boy she'd been seeing, about a recipe she'd tried that went terribly wrong, and I realized something important. She didn't want my apology. She wanted my presence. She wanted to know that her grandmother was thinking about her, not that her grandmother felt guilty for thinking about her. By the end of that week, something quiet happened. I don't mean something dramatic. I mean something I almost missed because I wasn't looking for it. People started behaving differently around me. My daughter asked my opinion about repainting her kitchen, something she hadn't done in years. My neighbor walked over and invited me for coffee instead of just waving from across the yard. My granddaughter called me, not the other way around. She called me first, and when she did, she opened with, Grandma, I was thinking about you. I sat with that for a long time, because here's what I understood. When I stopped apologizing, I didn't become rude or difficult or demanding. I became visible, not louder, not pushier, just fully, quietly present. I stopped shrinking myself before entering every room, every conversation, every phone call. And when I stopped shrinking, people finally saw me at full height. They saw a woman worth waiting for, worth listening to, worth calling on a Thursday afternoon for no reason at all. You know what the cruelest part of constant apologizing is? It works. People believe you. They believe you when you say you're a bother, and they adjust accordingly. They stop calling. They stop asking. They stop waiting. Not because they're heartless, because you trained them. But the beautiful thing is, the reverse is also true. When you stop apologizing for being here, people start treating you like you belong here. Because you do. When you stop shrinking, people finally see you at full height. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. If I stop saying sorry, what do I say instead? That's the right question. And I have 4 answers. Language is powerful, not in a self-help book kind of way, in a real daily practical way. The words you choose every morning, at the dinner table, on the phone, at the grocery store. They shape how people see you every single day. And more importantly, they shape how you see yourself. When you say sorry, you are placing yourself below someone. You are saying, I owe you something for the inconvenience of being me. But when you replace that word with something else, something true, something warm, something that doesn't diminish you, you change the entire dynamic, not just for them, for yourself. Here's the first one, and it's the simplest. Instead of saying, sorry I'm so slow, say, thank you for waiting. I tried this at the pharmacy last month. I was counting out my pills with the pharmacist, and it took longer than usual. Old fingers, small bottles, you know how it goes. There was a line behind me. Normally, I would have apologized 3 times before we were done. Instead, when we finished, I looked at the young woman behind the counter and said, thank you for your patience. She smiled and said, of course, ma'am, any time. That was it. No pity, no awkwardness, just respect. And here's why it works. Sorry puts you beneath someone. Thank you puts you beside them. It turns an apology into a gift. You're not begging for tolerance. You're acknowledging their kindness, and people respond to that completely differently. The second one. Instead of, sorry, can you repeat that? Say, I want to make sure I hear you clearly. My friend Ruth, she's 84, taught me this one without even knowing it. Ruth has been losing her hearing gradually for years. She used to dread conversations because she'd have to keep asking people to repeat themselves, and every single time she'd say sorry. She told me it made her feel invisible, like she was watching the world through glass. One day, she stopped saying sorry and started saying, I want to hear you clearly. Could you say that one more time? She said the difference was immediate. People leaned in. They spoke slower, not in a condescending way, in a caring way. They looked her straight in the eyes. For the first time in years, Ruth said, people were talking with her, not past her. One sentence changed the entire room. That's all it took. The third one might be the most important for those of us who live alone. Instead of, sorry for calling, say, I was thinking about you. I've already told you what happened when I tried this with my granddaughter, but let me explain why it matters so deeply. When you open a phone call with an apology, you're telling the other person, this call is a burden. You've already framed the entire conversation as an imposition before a single word of substance has been spoken. But when you open with, I was thinking about you, you're telling them something entirely different. You matter to me. You're on my mind. I called because I love you, not because I need something. Your children, your grandchildren, They don't want you to apologize for loving them. They want to know you're thinking about them. That's the gift. Give them that instead. The fourth one is the hardest and the shortest. Instead of, sorry, I need to sit down, say nothing. Just sit down. You don't need to announce your body's needs to the world. You don't need to ask permission to rest. You don't need to explain why your knees ache or why you can't stand as long as you used to. Just sit, quietly, naturally, the way you'd take a sip of water or adjust your glasses. Nobody apologizes for being thirsty. Nobody apologizes for needing to see. So don't apologize for being tired. Your body carried you through 90 years of this life. It earned the right to rest whenever it needs to, without explanation, without apology, without shame. You don't owe anyone an explanation for having needs. Needs aren't weakness. They're proof you're still here. So let me leave you with this. Last Sunday, I went back to my daughter's house for dinner. Same table, same chairs, same pot roast she makes every week, because she knows it's my favorite and she doesn't need me to ask anymore. I sat down, took my napkin, spread it across my lap, and didn't say a word about being slow or being late or being anything other than exactly what I was. A 90-year-old woman sitting down to eat with her family. I ate slowly. I have always eaten slowly. My husband Richard used to joke that I savored every meal like it might be my last. He'd finish his plate, lean back in his chair, and watch me with this little smile on his face. He never once rushed me, not in 53 years of marriage. And you know what? Nobody at that table rushed me either, not when I stopped giving them permission to. Everyone finished before me. My son-in-law got up to refill the water pitcher. My daughter stayed. She didn't reach for her phone. She didn't start stacking plates. She rested her chin on her hand and said, "Mom, tell us about that trip you and Dad took to the Grand Canyon, the one where he got completely lost." And so I told it. I told the story slowly, the way I eat, the way I live now, without apology. My granddaughter laughed so hard she nearly spilled her glass. My son-in-law shook his head and said, "That man was something else." Nobody looked at the clock. Nobody shifted in their chair, because I hadn't given them a reason to. I hadn't whispered, "Sorry, I'll keep it short." I hadn't announced that my story was taking too long. I just told it, the way it deserved to be told. That's what happens when you stop apologizing for taking up space. You don't become louder. You don't become difficult or demanding. You become the person you always were underneath all those sorries. A woman with stories worth hearing. A mother whose opinion still shapes the room. A grandmother whose phone calls are gifts, not interruptions. A human being who has earned, through 90 years of living, laughing, grieving, surviving, and loving, the right to sit at any table, in any room, for as long as she pleases. I'm grateful for Sunday dinners where nobody rushes me, for phone calls that begin with love instead of apology, for the right to sit down on a park bench without announcing why, for quiet mornings where I drink my coffee at my own pace and nobody asks if something is wrong. I'm grateful for Dorothy and Helen and Ruth, women who taught me, through their own pain, what happens when you shrink yourself too small for too long. And I'm grateful for learning, finally, at 90 years old, that peace doesn't come from making everyone else comfortable at your own expense. Peace comes from knowing, truly knowing deep in your tired, beautiful bones that you deserve to be comfortable too. Every time you apologize for existing, you teach the people around you that you should. So stop teaching them that. You've earned your place at the table. Take it. Sit down. Eat slowly. Tell your story, and don't you dare say sorry for any of it. Before you go, I want you to do one thing for me. Think of something, just one thing, you've been apologizing for that was never your fault. Eating slowly, walking carefully, needing to rest, calling someone you love, taking up space in a room you've earned the right to stand in. Whatever it is, stop apologizing for it. Starting today, not tomorrow. Today. Type 1 in the comments if you're ready to stop shrinking. Type 0 if you're not there yet. Either way, I'm glad you stayed with me. And if you want to sit with me again, I'll be here. Still learning, still taking up space, still figuring out this beautiful, stubborn business of growing old without growing smaller. Take care of your heart. Take care of your peace. And remember, you've earned your place, every single inch of it.